I was standing at her grave when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Who calls a man at his wife's burial? The voice on the other end was Harrison Blackwell, my wife's boss. A billionaire I'd met exactly once at a company Christmas party 5 years ago. "Mr. Carver, I need you to listen very carefully," he said, his usually commanding voice tight with something I'd never expected to hear from a man like him. Fear. Do not go home. Do not tell your family where you're going. Your wife recorded something before she died. Something that proves she didn't die of natural causes. And Mr. Carver, the person who killed her, is waiting for you at your house right now. I will see you shortly. The phone went dead. I stood there, dirt still under my fingernails from throwing the first handful of earth onto Margaret's casket, and felt the world tilt sideways. Around me, mourners were walking to their cars, wiping tears, heading home to casseroles and photo albums. My son Brandon was 50 feet away, talking to his wife Olivia by the hearse. They were arguing in low, sharp whispers, the kind married people have when they think no one's watching. I took a step toward them, my hand still gripping the phone, and that's when I heard it. Olivia's voice, cutting through the quiet cemetery air like a blade. "He's been standing there like a zombie for 2 hours. You need to get him to sign those papers this week, before the real will reading, before he finds out." Before I find out what? My name is Robert Carver. I'm 71 years old. And 3 days ago, I buried Margaret, my wife of 43 years. The doctors said it was heart failure, complications from a mystery illness that had slowly destroyed her over 6 months. She went from a woman who could garden for hours, who led the neighborhood book club, who never forgot a birthday or a face, to someone who couldn't hold a coffee cup without her hands shaking. Her hair fell out in clumps. Her skin turned the color of an old newspaper. She forgot words, forgot rooms, forgot sometimes who I was. The doctors ran every test. Blood work, scans, biopsies. "We just can't pinpoint it, Mr. Carver, doctor," Phillips had said, shrugging like he was apologizing for a delayed pizza delivery. "All her markers are strange, but it's probably just complications of age." She was 69, she looked 90. At the funeral, as I stood by her casket trying to understand how a healthy woman could deteriorate so quickly, her boss, Harrison Blackwell, the founder and CEO of Blackwell Industries, a man worth 9 figures, who called me a while ago, appeared, and he pulled me aside. He leaned in close, his expensive cologne mixing with the smell of funeral flowers, and whispered, "I found something in Margaret's office safe. You need to come to my headquarters immediately. Tonight." I stared at him, confused. My son appeared at my elbow almost instantly, as if he'd been watching us. "Dad, you look exhausted," Brandon said, his hand gripping my arm just a little too tight. "Let's get you home." But Blackwell didn't let go of my other arm. His eyes were intense, almost frightened. "And whatever you do," he hissed so quietly only I could hear, "don't tell your son or his wife where you're going." Margaret's instructions were very specific. "You are in danger." That night, I slipped out of my own house at 3 a.m. like a thief. And what I discovered in Harrison Blackwell's office, what Margaret had hidden away in the months before she died, didn't just reveal how she died. It revealed who killed her. And it revealed something even more horrifying. I was supposed to be next. Before I tell you what was in that office safe, I need you to do something for me. If you've ever felt like the people closest to you were strangers, if you've ever trusted someone completely only to discover you didn't know them at all, leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button, because what happened to Margaret and me could happen to anyone, and you need to hear this story. The smell of lilies was suffocating. It clung to the air in St. Michael's Church, thick and sweet. A smell I knew I would hate for the rest of my life. I stood by the open casket, staring at Margaret. My Margaret, 43 years. It wasn't long enough. She looked like a stranger. Her face was waxy and still, her hands folded perfectly over her chest. The last time I held those hands, They were trembling, desperately gripping mine in a hospital room while machines beeped their monotonous rhythm. Now, they were just cold. I could hear the murmurs of sympathy behind me. Such a tragedy. She was so young. Poor Robert. What will he do now? I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My focus kept drifting to my son, Brandon, and his wife, Olivia. They were standing near the doorway, greeting mourners. At least, that's what it looked like. But I've been a carpenter my whole life. I notice things. I notice when a joint doesn't fit right, when a foundation isn't level, and I noticed the way they kept glancing at me, not with sympathy, not with shared grief. They looked at me with impatience. A cousin I hadn't seen in years stopped them, offering a long, tearful hug. This trapped them in the corner, just within earshot. I tilted my head slightly, pretending to be lost in my grief. Olivia's voice was a low hiss, sharp enough to cut through the organ music. "He's been standing there like a statue for an hour," she whispered. Adam's reply was muffled. "It's fine. He's out of it." "He needs to stay out of it," Olivia insisted. "You have to make sure he signs those papers this week, Brandon, before the official will reading with the lawyer. It has to be done this week." My breath caught in my throat. "Papers? What papers?" Brandon sighed. It was the sound of a man annoyed. Not a son grieving his mother. "He's grieving, Liv. He won't notice what he's signing. He's a clueless old man when it comes to this stuff. Just let me handle it." A clueless old man. The words hit me harder than a physical blow. This was my son. My Brandon. I'd built my woodworking business, Carver and Son Custom Carpentry, from nothing. I'd started in a drafty garage with my father's old hand tools. I'd worked 16-hour days, my hands cracked and bleeding, just so Brandon could go to college, so he could have the white-collar life I never had. And when I retired 5 years ago, when Margaret first started getting tired, I'd handed the management of our finances over to him. "You understand this new world, son," I'd told him. "You handle the investments. You handle the accounts." I'd trusted him. I'd trusted him with every penny I'd ever earned. "What if he refuses?" Olivia pushed. "He won't," Brandon said, his voice cold. "He'll do whatever I tell him. He always does." The cousin finally moved on. Brandon and Olivia composed their faces back into masks of sorrow and walked toward me. "Dad," Brandon said, placing a hand on my shoulder. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. His eyes weren't red from crying. They were clear, calculating. I looked at Olivia, who was already staring at her phone, probably checking her email. "What papers?" I started to ask, my voice hoarse. Beth looked up, startled like a cat caught stealing cream. "What, Robert? We can't hear you. What papers were you talking about?" A flash of panic crossed her face, but she recovered instantly. She put on her saddest face. "Oh, Dad," she said, using the name she only used when she wanted something. "Just the funeral documents. The insurance things Mom wanted us to handle, so you wouldn't have to worry." It was a lie. It was a smooth, practiced lie. I knew it the way I knew the grain of a piece of oak just by touching it. My son, my only child, wasn't grieving his mother. He was planning something. That's when Harrison Blackwell appeared. I barely recognized him at first. I'd only met him once, years ago. He was a tall man in his early 60s. Silver hair perfectly styled, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my truck. But his face wasn't the confident CEO face I remembered from that Christmas party. He looked shaken. He stepped in front of Brandon, cutting him off mid-sentence. "Mr. Carver," he said, his voice low but firm, "I'm so deeply sorry for your loss." Margaret was. She was irreplaceable. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwell," I managed. "The flowers you sent were—" "I need to speak with you," he interrupted. His eyes flicked to Brandon, then back to me. "Privately. It's urgent." Brandon stepped forward, inserting himself between us. "Mr. Blackwell, my father, had a very difficult day. Maybe this could wait." "It can't," Blackwell said, his voice suddenly edged with steel. He looked at me. "Mr. Carver, I found something in your wife's office. Something she left for me to give to you. I need you to come to my headquarters tonight. Tonight? I was confused, exhausted. I don't think I can. He leaned in close, his hand gripping my elbow. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. Margaret came to me 4 months ago. She was terrified. She told me if anything happened to her, I was to give you what she'd left in her office safe. And she told me. He paused, his eyes boring into mine. She told me not to let Brandon intercept it. Do you understand what I'm telling you? The world seemed to stop. The organ music faded. The murmur of mourners became white noise. I stared at this billionaire, this man my wife had worked for but never really talked about, and I saw something in his eyes I never expected to see. Fear. What did she leave? I whispered. Not here, he said. Come to my office. Midnight. Use the executive entrance on 5th Street. I'll have security waiting for you. He pressed something into my hand. A business card with an address. And Mr. Carver. Whatever you do, don't tell your son where you're going. Margaret was very specific about that. She said if they found out. He trailed off, but the implication hung in the air, like smoke. If they found out what? I asked, my voice shaking. Harrison Blackwell looked past me, at Brandon and Olivia, who were watching us with barely concealed irritation. When he looked back at me, his expression was grim. She said you wouldn't survive the night. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember Brandon's words of comfort. I don't remember Olivia's hand on my shoulder. I don't remember pulling into the driveway of the house Margaret and I had built together 40 years ago. Suddenly, I was just standing in the entryway. The house was suffocatingly quiet. The silence was louder than all the weeping at the funeral home. This was the house Emily and I had built not just with wood and nails, but with laughter, arguments, and 43 years of shared breaths. Now, it was just an empty box. Dad, you should go upstairs and lie down, Brandon said, his voice soft. But it sounded fake now. Like a poorly sanded piece of wood, painted to look like something it wasn't. Olivia nodded, forcing a look of deep concern. He's right, Robert. You're exhausted. We'll handle everything. We'll bring you some tea later. They would handle everything. Just like they'd whispered at the funeral home. They wanted me out of the way. They wanted me sedated, grieving, clueless. I looked at the two of them, my son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, and his wife, the woman who smiled at every family dinner. They looked like strangers. No, I said, my voice sounding rusty. No, I'm fine right here. I lowered myself into my old recliner, the one Margaret always complained about, but never let me throw away. The worn leather felt like the only real thing in the room. Okay, Dad. Whatever you need, Brandon said. He and Olivia exchanged a look. I saw it. The flicker of annoyance. I was already veering off their script. They went into the kitchen. Their voices dropped to whispers, the same conspiratorial tone I'd heard at the funeral parlor. I sat perfectly still, straining to hear. Tomorrow morning, at the latest. Just get him to sign. Power of attorney covers everything. Power of attorney. The words sent ice through my veins. I looked at the clock on the mantel. It was barely 8 in the evening. Blackwell wanted me at his office at midnight. 4 hours. I just had to wait 4 hours, then slip out. But Brandon and Olivia weren't leaving. They settled into the living room, flanking me like guards. Olivia made tea. For herself. Not for me. Brandon scrolled through his phone but kept glancing up at me, watching, always watching. You two should go home, I said, after an hour of suffocating silence. Get some rest. You've done so much today. We're staying tonight, Dad, Brandon said, his tone leaving no room for argument. We don't want you to be alone. No. They didn't want me to leave. We already brought our things, Olivia added, gesturing to 2 overnight bags by the door I hadn't noticed. We'll stay in the apartment over the garage. That way we're close if you need anything. The apartment. The one I'd built when Brandon was in college. It had a perfect view of the driveway, the front door, the only way in or out. They were watching me. They were making sure I stayed put. At 10 o'clock, I forced myself to stand. "I'm going to bed," I announced, making my steps heavy and slow, like an exhausted old man. "Good idea, Dad," Brandon said. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a big day." A big day? For what? For me to sign whatever papers they'd prepared? I trudged up the stairs, making sure they heard every footstep. I went into my bedroom. Margaret's in my bedroom, and closed the door. I could hear them moving around downstairs, their voices low and relaxed, now that I was out of sight. I sat on the edge of the bed, my body rigid. I did not turn on the lights. I watched the clock. 10:30. 11. 11:30. At 11:40, I heard their footsteps on the stairs leading to the garage apartment. I heard the exterior door close. I waited 10 more minutes. Then I stood up. I couldn't go out the front door. They'd see me from the garage apartment window. I couldn't go out the back door, the porch light was motion activated. I had to use the basement. I crept down the hallway, past Brandon's old room, past the linen closet where Margaret kept the lavender soap I always loved. I went down the stairs one agonizing step at a time, avoiding the third step from the bottom, the one I always promised Margaret I'd fix because it creaked. The basement air was cold and damp, smelling of earth and old paint. I navigated in the dark, my hands brushing against my old tools, my workbench. I went to the small square window at the very back, the one half buried by Margaret's overgrown hydrangeas. I hadn't opened it in 20 years. The metal latch was rusted shut. I fumbled in the dark for a screwdriver, my fingers finding one by feel. I jammed it into the lock, pushing with all my strength. The rust flaked. It wouldn't budge. "You are in danger." Blackwell's voice. I pushed harder. A loud crack as the old latch snapped. I froze. Silence. I waited 1 minute. 2. No sound from above. I wrestled the window open. It was a small opening, meant for ventilation, not escape. I pushed my head and shoulders through, scraping my back on the rough concrete. I tumbled out into the wet hydrangeas, cold mud soaking my knees. I was out. I didn't run. I crouched low, staying in the shadows of the hedges, moving along the side of my own house. I didn't look back. I just kept moving, block after block, until I was sure no one could see me. The air was frigid. It bit at my face, but I barely felt it. Finally, I reached the 24-hour bus depot. The fluorescent lights were harsh, illuminating a few lost souls sleeping on benches. I ignored them and went straight to the taxi stand outside. A single cab was idling. I got in, my voice trembling. Blackwell Tower. 5th Street Executive Entrance. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror, an old man, out of breath, his coat stained with mud. He just nodded and hit the meter. As the taxi pulled away, I finally looked back, and I realized I had no home to return to. Blackwell Tower was a monument of black glass and steel that seemed to pierce the pre-dawn sky. The executive entrance on 5th Street was unmarked, just a simple glass door with a security keypad. As I approached, the door clicked open. A security guard in a crisp uniform nodded at me. "Mr. Carver, Mr. Blackwell is expecting you. 32nd floor." I stepped into an elevator lined with polished brass. It moved so smoothly I barely felt it. The only sound was the soft ding as we passed each floor. I caught my reflection in the brass. I looked wild. My white hair was sticking up, my face pale with exhaustion, my eyes wide with a fear I couldn't hide. The doors opened directly into a reception area. It was dark, save for the blue glow of computer monitors on sleeping desks. A single light came from an office at the far end, Harrison Blackwell's corner office. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights below. When he turned, I saw the same shaken expression he'd worn at the funeral. "Thank you for coming, Robert," he said, his voice low and serious. He didn't offer to shake my hand. He motioned to a black leather sofa. "Please, sit down." I sat on the edge, my muddy coat feeling like a sacrilege on the expensive furniture. Blackwell walked to a bar built into the mahogany wall. He didn't ask. He just poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into 2 heavy crystal glasses. He handed one to me. "Drink it," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. I took a sip. It was scotch, expensive, and it burned all the way down. A fire that momentarily pushed back the cold fear. I drank the whole thing in one gulp. Blackwell watched me, then nodded. He took a small sip from his own glass and set it down. I considered Margaret's family. "Robert," he said, his voice softer now. "She started with me 22 years ago, when Blackwell Industries was just 3 employees in a warehouse. The company's worth $800 million now. She wasn't just my chief financial officer. She was the person I trusted most in the world." My heart ached hearing him talk about her like that. "She respected you, Mr. Blackwell. She loved her job." "She did," he agreed. "Which is why I knew something was terribly wrong 6 months ago. 6 months ago. When Margaret started getting sick," Blackwell paced slowly. "She started making mistakes. Small things at first. Transposed numbers, forgetting meetings, things Margaret never did. I called her in. I asked if she was all right. She looked terrified, Robert." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "She told me she was just tired, that she was getting old. I told her to take a vacation. She refused. She said she couldn't leave. She said she had to keep watching." "Watching what?" I whispered. "She wouldn't say." "Not then." Blackwell finished his drink and set the glass down with a decisive click. "She just got worse. The fatigue. The shaking hands. You saw it." I nodded. The image of Margaret struggling to hold her coffee cup flashed in my mind. "I thought she was ill," Blackwell said. "I thought maybe she had early-onset Alzheimer's. I was preparing to offer her a full retirement package with medical coverage. But then 3 months ago, she came in here, right where you're sitting, and she was crying." He looked at me, his eyes hard. "She told me she wasn't sick. She said, 'Harrison, I think my son is stealing from me. And I think he's trying to kill me.'" The words hit me like a physical blow. Even though I had fled my own home, even though Blackwell had warned me, hearing him say it, hearing that Margaret knew, it was devastating. "But that's not why I called you," Blackwell said, his voice dropping again. "That's not what I found." "Then what?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He walked to his desk. He picked up a simple manila envelope and a small digital recorder. After that conversation, Margaret became even more secretive. She came in early, stayed late. She was investigating something. And then 2 weeks before she went into the hospital for the last time, she came to me with this. He held up the recorder. "She asked me to keep it in my personal safe. She said if anything happened to her, I was to give it to you immediately. And she said, and I'll never forget this, she said, 'Don't let Brandon see it. Don't let him know it exists. If he finds out, Robert won't survive.'" He set the recorder on the coffee table between us. My name was written on a piece of tape on the side. Margaret's handwriting. "I don't know what's on it, Robert," Blackwell said, "but I have a terrible feeling. And there's someone else you need to meet. He's been looking into this for me. He's waiting in the conference room." Before I could respond, Blackwell walked to a set of frosted glass doors at the far end of the room and pushed them open. When I saw who was standing inside, my legs went numb. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, a dark shape against the glittering cold skyline of the city. He wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at us as we entered. He was nothing like Harrison Blackwell. Where Blackwell was polished, expensive, and controlled, this man was rough. He was maybe 45, wearing a worn black leather jacket that looked like it had seen too many long nights and faded jeans. His face was all sharp angles and 5 o'clock shadow. And his eyes were dark, sharp, and serious. They looked at me, and I felt instantly naked. like he was cataloging every detail. He looked like the kind of man who lives in the shadows, the kind of man I'd cross the street to avoid. "Robert," Harrison Blackwell said, closing the heavy door behind us. The soft click of the latch echoed in the sterile room. "This is Luis Navarro. He's a private investigator. Former NYPD detective. 15 years homicide division." The words didn't compute. Private investigator. My confusion, which had been a cold fog, instantly morphed into a hot, bright flush of anger. A private investigator? I looked from Blackwell to this rough-looking stranger and back again. "What the hell is this, Harrison? What's going on? Why is he here?" Blackwell took a deep breath. "Robert, please sit down. What I'm about to tell you is difficult." "I'm already standing," I said, my voice hard. The scotch in my stomach felt like acid. "I just fled my own home. My son and daughter-in-law are there, and now you're showing me a private detective at 1 a.m. You tell me what's going on right now." Blackwell, a man who commanded boardrooms, actually looked uncomfortable. He ran a hand over his perfect gray hair. "Robert, I hired Luis 3 months ago." "For what? Corporate security? To sweep for bugs?" "No," Blackwell said, his voice flat. "I hired him to investigate Margaret." It was a physical blow. The air rushed out of my lungs. "You what?" All the grief, the fear, the exhaustion of the last 24 hours finally found an outlet. It exploded into pure, white-hot rage. "You dared?" I took a step toward Blackwell, my fists clenching at my sides. "You dared to spy on my wife? My sick wife? While she was dying? What kind of monster are you? She gave you 22 years. She was the most loyal person." "Mr. Carver, you don't understand," Blackwell started, holding up his hands. "No, you don't understand." I was shouting now, my voice cracking. "You think you own everyone? You think because she worked for you, you had the right to put a tail on her? To dig into her private life? Get him out of here. Whatever sick secret you think you found, I don't want to hear it. You have no idea what she went through." The investigator, Luis Navarro, hadn't moved an inch. He just watched me, his expression completely unreadable. Now, finally, he spoke. His voice was gravelly, low, and it cut through my anger like a serrated knife. "He's right, Mr. Carver. You don't understand. You stay out of this," I snarled, turning on him. Luis took a step forward, out of the shadows, ignoring my threat. "I wasn't spying on your wife, sir. I was working for her." I stopped. My mouth was open. My fist was still clenched. The rage evaporated, replaced by a cold, dizzying, impossible confusion. "What? What did you say?" "Harrison Blackwell didn't hire me to investigate Margaret," Luis said, his dark eyes looking straight into mine, holding my gaze. "He hired me because Margaret requested it." He paused, letting the impossible weight of that statement settle in the cold, dark room. "Your wife, Mr. Carver," he said quietly. "She was the client." My mind just stopped. The anger that had been boiling inside me evaporated, replaced by a cold, dizzying void. "Margaret was the client?" I whispered, staring at the hard, impassive face of the investigator. "What? What are you talking about? That's impossible. She would have told me. We didn't keep secrets." Luis Navarro didn't blink. He just stared at me with those dark, unreadable eyes. "Mr. Carver, 3 months ago, your wife requested a private meeting with Mr. Blackwell. She came to this building. She was terrified. She told him she believed she was seriously ill, but that she didn't trust her medical diagnosis." "Didn't trust Dr. Phillips?" I said, shaking my head. "He's been our family doctor for 15 years. Why wouldn't she?" Because the symptoms didn't add up, Harrison Blackwell stepped forward again, taking over. His voice was low and grave. "Margaret was a financial officer, Robert. She lived by numbers. Her entire world was about things making sense. And her illness didn't make sense to her. She told me she felt managed." He paused, letting the strange, cold word hang in the air. And she told me she knew who was behind it. She said she suspected your son, Brandon. The word came out as a croak. No. No. He loved his mother. He wouldn't. She told me, Blackwell said, his voice hard as steel, that Brandon was desperate for money. That he'd approached her at the office 3 separate times, demanding she give him access to company investment accounts. He wanted to borrow against the employee pension fund. My stomach tightened. I knew Brandon had some credit card debt. He'd mentioned it once or twice. But desperate? She was the gatekeeper of that money, Blackwell continued. She managed payroll, investments, the company's financial lifeblood. He asked her to embezzle for him. He called it an advance. She called it felony theft. She refused. She told him if he ever asked again, she would report him to me and to the police. Blackwell's jaw tightened. That was the last time they spoke about finances. 3 months ago. And Robert, that's when her illness started to get rapidly worse. The pieces were clicking into place with a horrifying metallic sound. Brandon's impatience at the funeral, Olivia's lies, the papers. They weren't just grieving children. They were. What? What were they? I must have said it out loud, because Blackwell gripped my arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. Robert, that's not all. She gave me a direct instruction, a contingency plan. Her voice was shaking, but her eyes were cold. I will never forget the look in her eyes. She looked me dead in the face and said, Harrison, if anything happens to me, if I die suddenly, I want you to check Brandon and Olivia. Use your resources. Don't let them get away with it. I stared at him, my mind reeling. Check them for what? For stealing? No, Blackwell said, shaking his head. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that chilled me to the core. She looked at the door as if she was afraid someone was listening, even here in my office. And she whispered, and for God's sake, check Robert's coffee. Check Robert's coffee. My coffee. My coffee. Every morning for 43 years, Margaret had made my coffee. But no, not for the last 6 months. My mind flashed back. An agonizing crystal-clear image. Margaret in her bathrobe, her hands shaking so badly she couldn't hold the kettle. Olivia smiling, taking the kettle from her mother-in-law's trembling grip. I'll handle it, Mom, she'd said, her voice full of that fake sweet concern. You just rest. I'll take care of Dad. I'll bring you both your coffee. She brought me my coffee every morning. Here you go, Dad, just the way you like it. I thought about the fatigue, the aches in my joints that I had blamed on my 71 years, the mental fog, the dizziness. I thought it was grief. I thought it was the stress of watching my wife die. Oh my God, I whispered, the words tearing from my throat. Oh my God, she knew. Margaret knew she wasn't just sick. Luis Navarro, who had been silent this whole time, finally spoke again. His voice was flat and cold, stating a fact, not a theory. No, Mr. Carver, he said, she wasn't sick. He paused, letting me feel the full weight of it before he delivered the final devastating blow. And we believe so are you. I know what you're thinking. No way. No way your own child would do something like this. But you didn't hear my wife's voice on that recording. You didn't hear her begging me to make sure they paid for what they did. So before I tell you what happened next, what was on that recording, Margaret left for me, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, because this next part, it's going to leave you speechless. Asterisk. My coffee. The words slammed into me, knocking the breath from my lungs. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. My coffee, the ritual that started my day. The one thing I'd clung to as the world fell apart. My mind raced backwards, stumbling over the last 6 months. Margaret, my Margaret, had always been the first one up. For 43 years, I'd woken up to the smell of her dark roast filling the house, It was the smell of safety. It was the smell of home. But she hadn't made the coffee. Not for a long time. As her illness progressed, as the shaking in her hands got worse, Olivia had stepped in. It happened so gradually, I hadn't even noticed. "Oh, Dad, let me get that. You just sit with Mom. Here you go, Robert. Fresh and hot. Just how you like it. You need to keep your strength up." Her kindness. Her constant, hovering, suffocating kindness. And I had been tired. A bone-deep exhaustion that felt nothing like the physical fatigue from my workshop. My joints ached, a deep throb in my knees and elbows that I'd blamed on the damp autumn air. I'd blamed it on 71 years of hard work. And the brain fog, that was the worst part. There were days I'd walk into my own workshop and just stand there, forgetting what tool I needed. I'd blamed it on grief. I'd blamed it on the stress of watching my wife fade away. I looked at Harrison Blackwell, my heart hammering against my ribs. A new, horrifying timeline clicking into place. They were poisoning me. I whispered. The words tasted like acid. I stared at my own hands, half expecting to see them shaking. Just as Margaret's had. How? How do you know? How could Margaret? She was smarter than they were, Luis cut in, his voice devoid of emotion. She knew they were lying, and she authorized us to get the proof. She set this entire investigation in motion herself before she died. Blackwell nodded, his face a mask of grim respect. She protected you, Robert. Even while she was dying, she was protecting you. She knew you wouldn't believe her without proof. She knew you'd trust Brandon, so she gathered evidence. Luis leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto mine. He just delivered it. 3 months ago, after that meeting where she warned Mr. Blackwell about Brandon, she went back to her doctor. She told him she was worried about her memory and her exposure to household chemicals. That's the term she used. She insisted on a full toxicology screening. She told Dr. Phillips it was just for her own peace of mind. He paused. But she had already contacted Mr. Blackwell. He gave her my number. She called me from the hospital parking lot. She told me she was faking a routine checkup, but that the blood they were drawing was real. And she needed me to intercept the results. Intercept? I was lost. She was terrified Brandon or Olivia would find out, Blackwell explained, his voice tight with anger. She was worried they had access to her medical records, that they might try to silence Dr. Phillips or change the results. So I intercepted the report. It was sent directly to a secure location. We had our first piece of proof. But that only proved she was being poisoned, Luis said. It didn't prove who was doing it, and it didn't help you. That's where it got complicated. My coffee, I said slowly. How did you get my coffee? Luis's expression flickered. Maybe admiration. Maybe sadness. That was Margaret. That was all her. She knew they were poisoning you too. She saw you declining. She knew it was the coffee Olivia made you every single morning. She just had to get us a sample without them knowing. He paused, letting me absorb the sheer cold brilliance of my dying wife. The last week, the week before she went into the hospital for the last time, she knew she wasn't coming home. She called Olivia from her bed. She asked her to bring her a thermos of that good coffee Olivia always made for you. Robert, she said the hospital coffee was terrible, and she just wanted one last taste of home. My God. I had to grip the arm of the sofa to keep from falling. Olivia brought it, Luis said, his voice a low growl. She probably thought your wife was too sick to notice the taste. Or maybe she was trying to speed things along. We'll never know, but Margaret didn't drink it. She told the nurse it was too bitter and asked her to set it aside. He leaned forward. The moment Olivia left that hospital room, Margaret called Mr. Blackwell. Mr. Blackwell called me. I walked into that hospital, retrieved the sealed thermos from the nurse's station, and sent it straight to the lab. I couldn't breathe. I buried my face in my trembling hands. The image of Margaret, frail and skeletal in that sterile white room, surrounded by beeping machines. She was still fighting, not for herself. She knew it was too late for her. She was fighting for me. She saved my life. I choked out, the tears finally coming. Hot and agonizing. She did, Blackwell said, his voice thick. She used the very last of her strength to give us the weapons we needed. Luis clicked open the latches on a hard-shell briefcase. The sound was loud in the silent pre-dawn office. He pulled out his laptop and a set of bound documents. He placed them on the glass table in front of me. And now, Mr. Carver, he said, turning the laptop screen to face me, you need to see exactly what we found in that coffee. Luis didn't say another word. He just turned the laptop around to face me. The screen glowed in the dark conference room, casting a sick blue light on our faces. What is that? I whispered. Surveillance, Luis said, his voice flat. He hit the spacebar. The video was grainy, stamped with a date from 2 weeks ago. It was a street, my street, filmed from a parked car. I saw Olivia's white SUV pull up, not into our driveway, but half a block down, in the alley beside the old Henderson place. She parked and cut the lights. She was looking around, nervous. My heart was pounding. What was she doing? A figure emerged from the shadows between two buildings. A man in a dark hoodie. He was impossible to identify. He walked up to her passenger side window. She rolled it down. I watched, my stomach twisting, as she handed him a wad of cash. He, in return, passed her a small white paper packet, no bigger than a sugar packet. The exchange was over in 3 seconds. He melted back into the shadows. Olivia immediately put the car in gear and drove away. What is that? I asked, my voice hoarse. Is that drugs? Was she buying drugs? Harrison Blackwell, who was watching over my shoulder, let out a slow, pained breath. Worse, Luis said. He didn't elaborate. He just closed the video file and opened another. This, he said, is from inside your kitchen. From the ventilation grate above your stove. You put a camera in my house? The feeling of violation was overwhelming. Margaret authorized it, Luis said, cutting off my protest. She told us to. She said, Olivia always hummed when she was in the kitchen. And it drove her crazy. She knew exactly where the loose vent cover was. She drew us a map. He pressed play. I was looking at my own kitchen. My God, it was my kitchen. The familiar blue and white tiles Margaret had picked out 20 years ago. The copper kettle on the stove. But the angle was high, looking down like the eye of God. The timestamp was from 10 days ago, 7:03 a.m. I remembered that morning. Margaret was in the hospital for tests. I was alone. And Olivia had stayed the night to keep me company. I watched the screen as Olivia walked into the frame. She was wearing her pink silk bathrobe, the one Brandon had bought her for Christmas. Her hair was messy from sleep. She looked normal. She looked like my daughter-in-law. She started the coffee-making ritual. She got out the bag of dark roast, my favorite. She took down my favorite mug, the heavy ceramic one I'd made myself in a pottery class decades ago. Then she stopped. She didn't just look over her shoulder. She turned her whole body, listening. She stared down the dark hallway toward my bedroom for a long, agonizing 10 seconds. She was making sure I was still asleep. Then, convinced she was alone, she moved quickly. She didn't go to the spice rack. She reached deep into the pocket of her bathrobe. She pulled out a small, dark glass vial. A vial, not a vitamin bottle. It was small, with a black cap. My breath hitched. She unscrewed it. She looked around one more time, her eyes darting left and right, a picture of pure, calculating guilt. Then she held the vial over the water reservoir of the coffee machine. She tapped the bottom. A tiny puff of fine white powder fell into the water. 1. She tapped it again. 2. A third time. 3. She screwed the cap back on, slipped the vial back into her pocket, and then, without missing a beat, she scooped the coffee grounds into the filter and pressed the brew button. I watched, paralyzed, as the machine gurgled to life, mixing the poison into the coffee I was about to drink. A sound, a low, guttural moan, ripped itself from my chest. I doubled over, my stomach heaving. The scotch and bile rose in my throat, and I dry heaved, the taste of ash and betrayal filling my mouth. I remembered that morning. I remembered her bringing me that cup. She'd brought it to me in the living room, smiling. That sweet, concerned smile. "Drink up, Dad," she'd said. "It's a cold one today. This will warm you up." I had drunk it all, every last drop. Luis didn't move. He didn't offer comfort. He just hit the spacebar, pausing the video on a perfect, clear, horrifying close-up of Olivia's face. Her eyes narrowed in concentration as she held the vial. "That, Mr. Carver," he said, his voice like granite, "was your coffee, brewed for you special." I stared at the frozen image on the screen. My own kitchen. My own daughter-in-law. Her face. A mask of cold concentration. The vial in her hand. The white powder falling into my coffee. "I drank it," I whispered, my hand instinctively going to my stomach. That morning, I drank. I drank all of it. Luis closed the laptop. The click of the lid closing was as final as a coffin shutting. "Yes, you did," he said, his voice cold. "And the morning before that, and probably every morning, for the last 6 months. He didn't offer sympathy. He was a man who dealt in facts. And he was just getting started." He reached into his hard-shell briefcase and pulled out 2 bound documents. They looked official, sterile, like something from a hospital or a police lab. He slid the first one across the glass table. "Report number 1, he said. "This is the full toxicology analysis from the blood sample Margaret gave us." The one she said was for a routine checkup. I stared at the cover page. It was full of numbers and chemical names that meant nothing to me. What is it?" "It's her death warrant," Luis said flatly. He flipped to the summary page and pointed a blunt finger at a specific line. "Your wife's blood contained levels of thallium, that's a rat poison, at concentrations that were, and I quote, incompatible with life." Incompatible. I trailed off. 10 times the lethal level, Harrison Blackwell clarified, his voice a low, furious growl. He'd read this before. He knew what it said. 10 times. I looked at them, confused. But if it was that high, why? "Because that's the genius of it," Luis said, his voice tinged with a cold, professional respect for the cruelty of the act. "It wasn't one massive dose. That would be messy, obvious. It would have triggered an immediate autopsy. A police investigation. No, this was a slow, steady build-up. They were feeding it to her, Robert, a little bit at a time. Probably in her food, her tea. For months." He pointed to the report again. "These levels didn't just appear. They accumulated. The thallium caused the nerve damage, the fatigue, the hair loss." My mind flashed back to Margaret in the bathroom, staring at the clumps of her beautiful silver hair in the brush, her face crumbling in despair. "And here's the thing," Luis continued. "Thallium is almost tasteless, and it mimics natural illness so perfectly that unless you're specifically looking for it, no doctor would ever find it." "The doctor," I stammered. "Dr. Phillips," he said. "He said it was heart failure. Complications of old age." "It was heart failure," Luis said. "But it wasn't old age. It was induced. They put her heart under so much chemical stress that it simply gave out. They didn't have to put a pillow over her face. They just let the poison do the work." He leaned back, his expression grim. "Her death was not natural, Mr. Carver. It wasn't an illness. It was a homicide. A slow, patient, and deliberate murder." The word, murder. I had thought it in my darkest moments. That maybe they had neglected her, stolen from her. But this was a new, unthinkable circle of hell. My son. My daughter-in-law. They had murdered my wife. I felt a coldness spread from my chest outward, a numbness that was almost a relief from the pain. But Luis wasn't finished. He let the word murder hang in the air for a beat. Then he slid the second identical-looking folder across the table. It landed with a soft, final thud in front of me. "Report number 2, he said. I didn't need to ask. I knew what it was. "This," he said, tapping the cover, "is the lab analysis of the coffee from that thermos. The coffee that Olivia brewed for you. Your coffee." I couldn't bring myself to open it. I just stared at the cover. "It shows the exact same chemical signature," Luis said, his voice like a judge's gavel. "Thallium, the same unholy poison they gave your wife." He leaned in, and for the first time, his voice was not just cold. It was angry. "The concentration is lower, of course. A chronic dose. Not an acute one. Not meant to kill you in a week. Meant to kill you in a year. Meant to be invisible." He pointed at me, at my shaking hands, at my pale, tired face. "The fatigue you're feeling, Mr. Carver. The brain fog you've been blaming on grief. The aches in your joints you think are just 71 years of carpentry. It's not." He tapped the report. "It's this. It's the poison. You've been drinking it every single morning. They are slowly killing you too. Before I tell you what happened next, what we did with this evidence, I need you to stop for a second. I need you to imagine drinking poison every day from the hands of someone you trust, someone you love. If that doesn't make you feel something, I don't know what will. Hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment telling me if you think you'd have seen the signs. Because what happened next, it required me to walk back into the lion's den. I looked at Blackwell. I looked at Lewis. The 2 lab reports sat on the glass table between us like death sentences. The video of Olivia poisoning my coffee was still burned into my retinas, and Luis said, his voice flat, but his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that pinned me to my seat. "Based on the evidence, the video of Olivia with the vial, the lies from your son, and this report, it's not a guess. It's a conclusion." He let the silence stretch, forcing me to absorb the full weight of it. "You are next." It wasn't a warning. It was a simple statement of fact. The floor didn't just tilt. It fell away. The glittering city skyline outside the window blurred into a smear of painful, mocking lights. I tried to speak, but my throat closed. A high-pitched ringing filled my ears. I wasn't just a grieving widower. I was a target. "What?" I finally managed. "What do I do?" Luis and Blackwell exchanged a look. "We have the evidence," Blackwell said carefully. "We have the video. We have the lab reports. We could go to the police right now." "Then let's go," I said, standing up too quickly. The room spun. "Let's go right now. Let's have them arrested." "It's not enough," Luis said immediately. "What do you mean, not enough?" Blackwell shot back, his own voice tight with anger. "It's murder. It's attempted murder. We have them on camera." Luis shook his head, his expression grim. "We have a video of Olivia putting an unknown substance into a coffee machine. We have a lab report of a thermos Margaret gave us that has poison in it. We have a toxicology report from 3 months ago." He leaned forward, ticking the points off on his fingers. "A good lawyer, and with the money they're trying to steal, they'll have the best will rip that to shreds. The lawyer will say Olivia was adding a health supplement. A vitamin powder, they'll say the thermos was contaminated after Margaret got it. They'll argue the toxicology report is circumstantial. They'll say Margaret died of heart failure, just like the doctor said. They'll create reasonable doubt. They'll get bail, and then they'll disappear. Or worse, they'll come back to finish the job. And this time, they won't use coffee." He let that sink in. The image of Brandon and Olivia out on the street, knowing I knew it was a death sentence. So what? I felt the hopelessness returning, a heavy, wet blanket. "We do nothing? We let them get away with it?" "No," Luis said. "We don't do nothing. We end this today." He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Detective Moreno? It's Luis. He's here. We're ready." He hung up and looked at me. "The police are already involved, Robert. I brought them the lab reports yesterday. They're on standby." They're just as angry as we are. But they need the final piece. They need the irrefutable link. The one thing no lawyer can argue away. What link? I asked. They need to catch them in the act, Luis said, his voice dropping. They need to witness Olivia, or Brandon, or both of them administering the poison. They need to seize that specific cup of coffee and the vial it came from at the same time. They need the chain of custody to be perfect. No doubts. No health supplement arguments. Just the act, the poison, and the arrest. All in one clean motion. I stared at him, my mind slowly, horribly connecting the dots. I saw where this was going. It was Harrison Blackwell who said it out loud, his voice horrified. My God, you can't be serious. You're not suggesting, Luis, you want Robert to go back? Go back? I shot to my feet, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. The room swayed. Go back in there? Are you insane? They are trying to kill me. They're expecting me at the house this morning. They're waiting with a cup of poison. What if they suspect something? What if they realize I'm not grieving properly? They'll use a pillow, a knife. I can't. I won't. I was hyperventilating, backing away toward the door. The escape from my house, the adrenaline, the terror, it all came crashing down on me. I was a 71-year-old man, not a spy. Robert, listen to me. Blackwell grabbed my shoulders. His grip was like a steel vice. Listen, this is the only way. For Margaret, this is the only way to guarantee they pay for what they did to her. For Margaret. The words cut through the panic like a bolt of lightning. He was right. This wasn't just about saving my life anymore. This was about justice for my wife. Margaret. She had used her last dying breath to set this in motion, to give me this chance. She had been a warrior. I couldn't be a coward. I stopped struggling. I took a shaky breath. I looked past Blackwell at Luis. How? I whispered. Luis was already moving. He was in his element. This was his world, not mine. It's just for one day, Robert. Just a few hours. But you have to be the best damn actor of your life. You have to go back there and be the clueless, grieving old man they expect. You have to be broken. You have to be manageable. They're in the apartment over the garage, I stammered, the words tumbling out. They're watching the house. They'll see me. Good, Luis said. That means they're contained. We know where they are. Here's the plan. He checked his watch. We have about 5 hours until they expect you to wake up. My team is already prepping. We're going to wire that house from top to bottom. How? They're there. They'll see you. They're watching the front of the house, waiting for you to come home, Luis said, a grim smile touching his lips. They're not watching the back. My team goes in through the basement window, the one you so conveniently opened for us. My God, my escape. We'll put micro cameras in the kitchen, in the living room, in the clock, on the mantle. We'll put a microphone on you. You'll wear a simple button-down shirt. The top button will be the mic. You'll have an earpiece so small a dentist wouldn't see it. I'll be in a surveillance van parked 2 streets over. I will hear every word you hear. I will see everything you see. He stepped closer, his dark eyes boring into mine. You will not be alone. And the police? I asked, my voice barely audible. They'll be parked right around the corner. 2 unmarked cars, filled with detectives who have already seen that video of Olivia. They are highly motivated. The instant that powder hits the coffee, we move in. They won't even have time to wash the cup. He stepped closer, his dark eyes boring into mine. But it all depends on you, Robert. You have to go back. You have to walk in that front door. You have to apologize for running off. You have to tell them you're ready to sign. He paused, the final terrible instruction hanging in the air. And then you have to ask your son for a cup of coffee. Luis drove me back. Not to my street, but 2 blocks away. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in pale, sickly shades of gray and pink. It was just after 6 in the morning. "My team is already inside," Louise said, his voice low. I touched my ear. The device was so small I could barely feel it. And the button? I touched the top button of the shirt Louis had given me to change into. It looked like every other button, but it was a microphone and a panic button. If anything feels wrong, you press it. We'll be through that door in 30 seconds. But you can't press it unless your life is in immediate danger. You understand? We need the coffee. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. "You can do this, Robert," Louis said, and for the first time, his voice softened. "Margaret believed in you. She set this whole thing in motion because she knew you were strong enough to finish it." I got out of the car. I walked those 2 blocks like a man walking to the gallows. Every step felt alien. This was the street I had lived on for 40 years. I knew every crack, every oak tree. But now, it felt like a movie set. Nothing was real. As I got closer, I saw it. My house. Margaret's roses, wilted from the cold, looked like weeping mourners. And in the window above the garage, I saw the curtain twitch. They were watching. They'd been waiting all night. My body was rigid with terror, but I forced Louis's instructions into my head. Be broken. Be clueless. Be manageable. I was an actor now. My life and my wife's justice depended on this performance. I let my shoulders slump. I scrubbed my face with my hands, making sure my eyes were red. I let the tremor I felt in my hands become visible. I didn't have to fake the exhaustion. I was a 71-year-old man who hadn't slept in 2 days, who had just learned his children were murderers. I shuffled up the front walk, not like a man returning home, but like a defeated old man surrendering. Before I could even get my keys out, the front door opened. Brandon stood there. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in wrinkled clothes, his hair a mess. He looked like he hadn't slept either, but from anger, not grief. "Dad, where the hell have you been?" he snapped, his voice rough. Olivia appeared behind him, her arms crossed, her face a mask of cold fury. "We've been calling you all night. We didn't know what to think. You just ran off." This was it. The performance began. I looked at them, my eyes wide, and I let my lower lip tremble. I manufactured a dry sob. I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice cracking. I stumbled past them into the entryway, letting my coat slide off my arms onto the floor. I didn't care. I started walking. I wandered into the living room, touching the back of Margaret's favorite chair. I couldn't be in the house," I stammered. I walked all night. I think I ended up at the old park. I just sat there. I let myself collapse into my recliner. I looked up at them. 2 angry silhouettes against the morning light. I made myself look as small and pathetic as possible. "You're right," I whispered. Brandon and Olivia froze. They exchanged a look. What did you say, Dad?" Brandon asked, his voice cautious. "You were right," I said, letting a tear roll down my cheek. I looked at the blue folder still sitting on the coffee table. The one they'd tried to get me to sign yesterday. "Yesterday. You were right. I can't do this. I can't be alone. I can't handle any of this. The house, the bills. I'm too tired." I watched them. It was like watching ice melt. The hard, angry lines on their faces softened, replaced by something else. Not sympathy. Relief. It was a visible, tangible thing. The tension left their shoulders. Olivia was the first to move. She rushed over, kneeling by my chair, grabbing my hand. Her touch was reptilian. "Oh, Dad," she cooed, her voice instantly returning to that sickly sweet tone. "Of course you're tired. We were so worried about you. We didn't mean to be angry." I'm sorry I snapped at you, Brandon added, running a hand through his hair. I was just scared. I thought you'd had an accident. Liar. You thought your golden goose had flown away. I'll sign the papers, I mumbled, gesturing to the folder. You're right. It's what Margaret wanted. She wouldn't want me to be burdened. That was the word Olivia had used, wasn't it? Burdened. Their smiles were so bright, so full of victory. They thought they had won. Good, Brandon said, nodding. Good, Dad. That's the right decision. I let the silence sit for a moment, letting them savor their win. And then I set the hook. But I need a favor, I whispered. Anything, Dad. Anything at all, Brandon said, pulling up the ottoman, sitting at my feet. The loyal, loving son. I want to have a dinner tonight, just us, here, one last time, I said, looking around the room. A final dinner to remember your mother. Olivia's smile faltered for just a second. A dinner. An inconvenience. But she recovered instantly. Oh, Robert, that's a lovely idea. And I want it to be perfect, I continued, playing the sentimental fool. Olivia, honey, could you make that roast chicken? The one with the rosemary and garlic? You know, it was her favorite. I'd like to have it one last time. Olivia glanced at Brandon. It was a lot of work, but I was the man about to sign away his future. Of course, she said. And Brandon, I said, turning to my son, my murderer. Son, I'm so tired. I don't think I can. I don't think I can face the morning alone. In the morning, when I sign the papers, could you make me a pot of coffee? I don't know how she did it. I don't know how she made it taste right. But you learned, didn't you? Could you please just make it for me? Just like she used to? Brandon's face lit up. It was the most genuine, unguarded expression I had seen on him in months. It was a look of pure, predatory triumph. I had just, of my own free will, asked him for the murder weapon. Of course, Dad, he said, his voice thick with fake emotion. I'd be honored to. A look of profound relief passed between them. Their victory was so close, so tangible, they could taste it. I had just handed them the perfect sentimental excuse for their final act. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you, children. This means so much to me. In my ear, so quiet I almost didn't hear it, Luisa's voice. Good. Now, get them out. Of course, Dad, Olivia said, her voice dripping with that sickening false sympathy again. We'll make it a beautiful dinner. And the coffee, Brandon added. I'll make it just like Mom did. Don't you worry about anything. I nodded, tears in my eyes. Real tears. Not from grief, from rage. Thank you, I whispered. But for the chicken, we need that fresh rosemary. The kind from the farmer's market. And that bottle of wine Margaret loved, the expensive one. I want tonight to be perfect. Olivia's face tightened. The farmer's market was a 40-minute drive one way. Oh, Dad, I'm sure the kind from the supermarket down the street is fine. No, I said, with a flash of what they would think was just an old man's stubbornness. No, it has to be. It has to be the fresh kind from that market. And the wine. We need the wine. I can't remember the name, but I'd know the bottle if I saw it. They have it at the gourmet market in Oakwood. They were getting annoyed. I could see it. This was an errand. An obstacle. We can go later, Brandon said dismissively. No, I'd like to go now, I pleaded, putting all the fake fragility I could into my voice. I need to get out of this house. Please. I don't think I should drive. Son, I'm too shaky. I don't want to be alone. Not right now. Please, can't we just go together, like a family? I hated myself for saying it. Like a family. Brandon and Olivia exchanged a long, silent look. I could read their minds. Humor him. Humor the broken old man. One signature, one pot of coffee, and it's all over. Just humor him. Olivia was the one who broke. She forced a bright, brittle smile. Of course, Dad. Of course we can. We'll go right now. Won't we, Brandon? Brandon sighed, the sound of a man deeply inconvenienced. Yeah, fine. Let's go. Go get your coat, Dad. That one's dirty. I looked down at the mud on my coat from my escape. Oh, yes. You're right. I walked slowly up the stairs, giving them time to grab their keys. I went into my bedroom and took off my coat. I looked in the mirror. My face was a gray mask. In my ear, Lewis's voice. Team is standing by. The moment you're off the street, they move. I took a deep breath. We got into their car. A black luxury SUV that I now realized my money had probably paid for. I sat in the back like a child. It was perfect. As Brandon pulled out of the driveway, I stared at my house. I thought about Luis's team, poised in the shadows, waiting. The drive was agonizing. They tried to make small talk. A lot of people came to the funeral, Olivia said from the front seat. The garden club sent a huge arrangement, Brandon added. That was nice. That was nice, I murmured, staring out the window. I watched the cars behind us. 2 cars back, a plain gray sedan. When we got to the gourmet market in Oakwood, I put the plan into action. I became the most indecisive, confused old man they had ever seen. Oh, I don't know, I mumbled, staring at the wall of wines. It had a red label. Or maybe it was blue. Dad, there are 100 red labels, Brandon said, his patience wearing thin. I know. Just give me a minute. I picked up bottles. I squinted at the labels. I asked a clerk for help. I made him describe 5 different Cabernets. I saw Olivia tapping her foot, scrolling furiously on her phone. How about this one, Dad? Brandon said, grabbing a random bottle. This looks good. No, that's not it. I shuffled to the produce section. The rosemary? It has to be fresh. I picked up bunches. I smelled them. I put them back down. I was burning time, 1 minute at a time. My phone in my pocket vibrated. A single, short buzz. The signal, Lewis, team, was in the house. I let out a slow breath. I had to give them more time. You know, I think I need to use the restroom. Brandon's head snapped around. Dad, now? I'm sorry, son. My prostate. I walked slowly, deliberately slowly, to the back of the store. I spent 5 minutes in the restroom. When I came out, Brandon and Olivia were standing by the checkout, their faces like thunder. Okay, I said, shuffling back to the wine. I grabbed the first bottle I saw. This one. This is it. I remember now. And the rosemary? Olivia asked, through gritted teeth. I grabbed a bunch. Yes, this. Perfect. We paid. The ride home was silent. They were done with me. They were done with my grief. They just wanted the signing. They just wanted the morning. As we pulled onto our street, I saw it. A white cable van parked across from my house. It wasn't the police van Luis mentioned, but it was a van. I felt a jolt of panic. Was that them? Or just a cable van? No. Luis said the police would be in the neighbor's house. The van was his team. The surveillance van. They were in place. We pulled into the driveway. We walked back into the house. It was exactly as we had left it. Not a cushion out of place. Not a speck of dust. But I knew it was different. The clock on the microwave, the smoke detector in the ceiling, the vent hood, they were all watching. Thank you, children, I said, my voice trembling. And this time, it was absolutely real. This means so much to me that you would do this. Olivia managed to smile. Of course, Dad. It's the least we can do. She put the groceries on the counter, her hands already reaching for the chicken. Now, let's get started on this dinner, she said, her voice full of false cheer. Tomorrow is a big day. Yes, I thought. It is. I want you to stop for a second. I want you to imagine what it felt like sitting in that house, knowing every word I said was being recorded, knowing the people I loved most in the world were about to try to kill me again. If you're feeling that tension right now, if your heart is racing, subscribe, leave a comment. Because the next morning, that's when everything came to a head. I didn't sleep. Not 1 minute. I sat in that recliner all night. The house silent, knowing that Louis' team had come and gone while I was out. The house felt violated. Watched. I could feel the cold, unblinking eyes of the cameras in the smoke detector, in the microwave clock. Under my shirt, the small, hard circle of the microphone button Louis had given me felt heavy, like a medal for a battle I hadn't yet survived. I was a 71-year-old decoy in my own home. At 7 in the morning, I heard them, footsteps on the stairs from the garage apartment. They were awake. They were coming. My heart began a low, painful drumming against my ribs. Be broken, be manageable. I forced myself up, splashed cold water on my face. The man in the mirror was a ghost, pale, eyes red-rimmed and wide with terror. For Margaret, I whispered to the reflection. For Margaret, I shuffled into the kitchen, putting on the performance of a man hollowed out by grief. They were already there. Olivia was at the counter, humming, just as Margaret had said. Brandon was at the table, scrolling through his phone. They looked up when I entered, their faces bright and expectant. They were actors, too. Dad, Brandon said, standing up, his voice full of fake concern. You're up. Did you get any sleep at all? I let my shoulders slump. I shook my head, avoiding his eyes. No, son. Not really. I kept thinking about your mother. Of course you did, Olivia said, gliding over, patting my shoulder. Her touch was repulsive. It's going to be hard for a while, Robert. But that's why we're here. To take care of you. To take care of me. The euphemism made me sick. This was it. The moment. I looked up, my voice trembling. I whispered. I feel so cold. Brandon, I would really love that cup of coffee now. Brandon's face lit up. It was the same look of pure, unguarded triumph I had seen yesterday. He'd taken the bait. Of course, Dad. Right away. You just sit there. I'll fix it just the way Mom used to. He went to the counter. He pulled down my mug, the heavy ceramic one. Olivia moved to stand beside him, leaning against the counter, a casual partner in the crime. I watched them. My heart was in my throat. The cameras were watching. Louise was watching. Olivia reached into the pocket of her pink silk robe, the same one from the surveillance video. She pulled out the small, dark glass vial. Don't forget Dad's vitamins, she said, her voice light and playful, loud enough for me to hear. We need him to get his strength back, to feel better after all this. Right, Brandon said. He took the vial from her. I watched, paralyzed, as my son, unscrewed the black cap. He glanced over his shoulder. I quickly looked down at my hands, pretending to be lost in my own sad world. I heard it, a sound that pierced the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Tap, tap, tap. 3 precise taps of the vial against the rim of the machine's water reservoir. The white powder drifted down, invisible, dissolving instantly. He was poisoning me. Right there, in the open, 10 feet away. He was murdering his father just as he had murdered his mother. He stirred the water with a long spoon before pressing the brew button. The machine gurgled to life. A sickening, familiar sound. A death rattle. Olivia smiled at me. See, Dad? We'll take care of everything. The coffee finished brewing. The smell of the dark roast, the smell I used to love, now smelled like arsenic. It smelled like the grave. Brandon poured the black, steaming liquid into my mug. He brought it over. He set it down in front of me on the kitchen table. Here you go, Dad, he said, his voice soft. Drink up. It'll make you feel better. I stared at the cup. It was a cup of death. Steam rose from it in lazy, inviting curls. My hand was shaking. This was not an act. I was terrified. My entire body was screaming, "No, run." But Luisa's voice was in my head. "We need the chain of custody. We need the act." I had to spill it. I couldn't drink it. But it had to look real. I reached for the mug, my hand trembling violently. My fingers twitched as they gripped the heavy ceramic handle. I brought it up halfway to my lips, and then I let my wrist collapse. "Oh!" I cried out. A genuine, high-pitched gasp of panic. The mug crashed onto the table. The scalding, poisonous liquid exploded everywhere. It splashed onto my lap, onto the floor. It was a huge, undeniable, table-soaking mess. "Oh God. I'm so sorry," I yelled, jumping up, batting at the hot liquid on my pants. I don't know. My hands, they're shaking so badly. I'm so clumsy, I've ruined it. Silence. I looked up. Brandon and Olivia were staring at the spilled coffee. Their faces were frozen. It was not concern. It was not sympathy. It was pure, unadulterated fury. All that careful measuring. All that poison, wasted, spilled on the floor. Brandon's jaw was clenched, so tight a muscle jumped in his cheek. Olivia's eyes were slit. They were staring at the puddle on the floor like it was a pool of liquid gold. I'm so sorry, Brandon," I stammered, grabbing napkins, dabbing uselessly at the mess. I ruined it. I still really need that coffee. I'm just so cold. Please, son. I'm sorry to be such a bother. But could you please just make me one more cup?" Brandon stared at me. His eyes were murderous. He wanted to scream. I could see it. He looked at Olivia. She gave him the tiniest, almost invisible nod. "Do it again. We have to." Brandon's breath hissed out between his teeth. "Fine," he bit out. His voice clipped. "Yeah, fine. I'll make another pot." He turned his back to me. He grabbed a new mug. He went to the sink. And Olivia reached right back into her pocket, her face a mask of cold, impatient determination, and pulled out the vial again. I watched them. And in the surveillance van 2 streets over, I knew Luis Navarro was watching too. "Got you," I thought, my heart pounding with a terrible, agonizing victory. "Got you again." The second cup of coffee sat on the counter, the poisoned one. I left it there. I knew they were watching it, willing me to drink it. But the next step in the plan was dinner. The hours passed in an agonizing, slow-motion crawl. The tension in the house was so thick I felt like I was wading through wet cement. Olivia was in the kitchen. The smell of roasting chicken and rosemary, Margaret's smell, filled the house. It was a grotesque mockery. Brandon sat in the living room, pretending to read the newspaper. His eyes constantly flicked from me to the kitchen and back to the untouched cup of coffee on the counter. "Aren't you going to drink your coffee, Dad?" he asked, his voice casual but laced with a sharp, nervous edge. "In a minute, son," I mumbled, pretending to be half asleep in my recliner. Just resting my eyes. The smell of the chicken, it's wonderful, Olivia. "Thank you." "You're welcome, Robert," she called from the kitchen, her voice brittle and fake. Finally, she called us to the table. The dining room table, the one I had built myself from a single piece of black walnut 40 years ago, was set. She had used Margaret's best china. The silver, the lace tablecloth. It was a perfect performance of a loving family dinner. I sat at the head of the table. They sat on either side. We looked like a normal family. The food was food. I moved it around my plate. I couldn't swallow. My throat was clamped shut. To fill the silence, I did what Luis had told me to do. I talked. I remembered. I remember. I started, my voice hoarse. "I remember the day Brandon was born. Your mother. She was so strong. She held him up and she said, "He has your hands, Robert. He's going to build things." Brandon froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. He looked at me, his eyes dark. And I continued, pushing on. I remember our 40th anniversary. When we drank that wine, she laughed so hard she cried. She said she wished we had another 40 years. "Dad," Brandon said, his voice sharp. Don't do this to yourself." "He's right, Robert," Olivia said, her smile tight. "There's no point dwelling on the past. We have to, look forward. We have to handle the future." There it was, the impatience. The dinner was over. The performance was done. "You're right," I said, letting my shoulders slump in defeat. "You're right. It's just hard. Let's just get it over with." The relief on their faces was disgusting. It was instant. "I'll get the papers," Olivia said. Springing up from the table, her plate still half full. She returned from the living room and placed the blue legal folder in front of me, right on top of Margaret's china. She clicked a pen and handed it to me. "It's all set, Dad," Brandon said, standing up, moving to stand behind me, looking over my shoulder. "Just sign," where Olivia marked the little yellow tabs. It's for the best." I picked up the pen. My hand was rock steady. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. This was it. The cameras were watching. The microphones were listening. Luis was listening. I held the pen over the first signature line. I looked at Brandon's reflection in the dark dining room window. I looked at Olivia, who was watching me with a greedy, hawk-like intensity. "Before I sign," I said, my voice suddenly loud and clear in the quiet room. They both froze. My tone had changed. The broken, grieving, old man was gone. "Dad," Brandon said, his voice cautious. I set the pen down. "I just want you to know something. Both of you." I turned my head and looked up at my son. "Your mother, Margaret," she knew. Olivia let out a short, nervous laugh, a high-pitched ha. "Knew? Knew what, Robert?" "Knew that we." "She knew," I repeated, my voice like ice. I looked from her to Brandon. "She knew you were stealing from me. She knew about the gambling debts. She knew. She knew about the poison." The color drained from Olivia's face. She looked like she had been slapped. Brandon just stared at me, his expression unreadable. But his eyes were suddenly cold. "Dead." "Dad," he said, and it was almost a chuckle. "What are you talking about? You're confused again. The grief, it's making you paranoid. Just sign the papers, Dad." He reached out, his hand moving to point at the signature line, trying to regain control. I stood up, knocking my chair backward. "She knew," I roared, my voice bouncing off the walls of my own home. "That you were killing her." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of the world ending. Olivia's face contorted, not in guilt, but in pure, animalistic terror. Brandon didn't look scared. He looked furious. He looked trapped. You crazy old fool," he snarled, his mask of the loving son completely evaporating, replaced by the monster underneath. He wasn't lunging for me. He lunged for the papers on the table, trying to grab the evidence. "Now," I bellowed, the signal word, the word of release. The front door and the back door exploded open at the same instant. The house filled with bodies, with dark blue uniforms, with guns drawn. "Police, don't move," hands in the air. Olivia let out a single piercing shriek that shattered the air. She stumbled backward, tripping over the dining room rug, and crashed into the china cabinet, sending Margaret's precious plates smashing to the floor. Brandon spun around, his eyes wide, looking for an escape. He tried to bolt for the back door, but two massive detectives tackled him, slamming him against the wall, right under a painting of Margaret's roses. "Brandon Harrison, Olivia Harrison," a detective I'd never seen before shouted, his voice booming through my house. "You are under arrest for the murder of Margaret Carver and the conspiracy to murder Robert Carver." "No, no!" Olivia was sobbing on the floor, a hysterical, incoherent mess. "It was him. He made me. It was his idea. He said he'd. Brandon was silent. His face was pressed against the drywall, his hands being yanked violently behind his back. The only sound he made was a low, animalistic grunt as the officers cuffed him. Luis Navarro walked calmly through the chaos. He wasn't in uniform. He just looked satisfied. He ignored the screaming, ignored Brandon, and walked straight into the kitchen. He returned a moment later. He was holding a clear, sealed evidence bag. Inside, it was the second coffee mug, the full one. The one Brandon had just poured. The poison. He held it up high so I could see it. "We have it all, Robert," he said, his voice grim but loud enough for everyone to hear. "We have the video. We have the lab reports. And now we have this." He looked at Brandon, who was twisted in the grip of the officers, his face a mask of disbelief and pure, venomous hatred. Hatred for me. "You should have known," Louis said to him, his voice flat. "You never underestimate a clueless old man. If you've made it this far, if your heart is racing, if you need to know what happened in that courtroom, subscribe right now. Leave a comment telling me what you think should happen to them. Because the trial, that's where the real truth came out. And it was uglier than I ever imagined." Asterisk. The next 3 months were a blur. I couldn't stay in the house. It was a crime scene, yellow tape across my front door, forensic teams cataloging every surface. Harrison Blackwell put me up in a hotel downtown. Not a hotel, a palace. All glass and polished marble, with men in uniforms opening doors. It was bigger than my house, but it was cold, impersonal. A bed that had never been slept in. I sat on the edge of it, the silence as deafening as the chaos had been. Luis Navarro came by once, in his leather jacket, looking completely out of place in the luxury suite. He told me the forensics had come back. The second cup of coffee, the one I almost drank, was loaded with enough thallium to kill a horse. The first cup, the one I'd spilled, was just as bad. They were both lethal. They had wanted me dead that morning. Luis also told me about the interrogations. Brandon and Olivia had been separated, put in different cells, and they'd turned on each other immediately. Olivia's statement was that she was a terrified, abused wife. She claimed Brandon was a violent sociopath who was secretly in massive debt to loan sharks. She claimed he murdered Margaret on his own, slowly, over months. And she claimed he threatened to kill her and her family if she didn't help him poison me. She cried through the entire 9-hour interrogation. Brandon's statement was different. Brandon claimed Olivia was the mastermind. He claimed she was the one, obsessed with money, desperate to move up in the world. He claimed she found the thallium online, researched how to administer it in slow doses. He claimed she was the one who poisoned Margaret, and that she blackmailed him into helping her poison me. It was a pit of vipers. "So, which one is it?" I asked Luis, my voice hollow. "Who's lying?" Luis took off his glasses and looked at me. "They're both lying," I whispered. "They're both lying," he confirmed. "They were in it together from the start. They're a team. But now the team has broken, and they will say anything to save themselves, including destroying each other." 3 months later, the trial began. The courtroom was a circus. Every seat was packed with the morbidly curious, with reporters scribbling furiously. I saw them as I walked in, flanked by a U.S. Marshal, Brandon, and Olivia. They sat at the defense table, separated by their legal teams. 3 months in jail had changed them. Olivia was thin, pale, her expensive hair now stringy and dark at the roots. She stared at her lap, trembling. Brandon was gaunt, his eyes sunken. But he wasn't trembling. He was rigid. He watched me walk past. And his eyes, they were still cold. still full of that terrifying, reptilian anger. The prosecution calls Robert Carver to the stand. My footsteps echoed in the silent room. I walked past my son. I could smell the stale sweat of the holding cell on him. I sat in the witness box. I took the oath. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Angela Reyes, stood. Mr. Carver, please, in your own words, tell the jury what happened on the morning of November 5th, the day after your wife's funeral. I told them. My voice was steady. It was cold. It didn't feel like my own. I told them about waking up. I told them about asking for the coffee. I told them about spilling the first cup. I told them about begging my son, begging him, to make me another. Then it was Brandon's lawyer's turn. A slick, expensive man. Mr. Carver, you were grieving. You admit you hadn't slept. You were exhausted, confused. Isn't it possible you misunderstood what your children were doing? Isn't it possible they were just trying to give you a vitamin? That your grief has made you paranoid? I turned, very slowly. I looked at my son. I locked eyes with Brandon. He stared back, defiant. I turned back to the jury. 12 strangers. A middle-aged mother. A young man who looked like a construction worker. An old woman who looked like someone's grandmother. I am 71 years old, I said. My voice clear and carrying to every corner of the silent room. I lost my wife of 43 years. And I lost my only son. I paused, letting the words hang. But I didn't lose my son today. I didn't lose him when he was arrested. I pointed at Brandon. I lost him the moment he decided that money was worth more than his mother's life. I lost him the moment he looked at his grieving father and didn't see a man to comfort, but a payout to be collected. The prosecutor stood up. Your Honor, the prosecution would now like to play Exhibit 47. The video was recovered from the kitchen surveillance system. The lights in the courtroom dimmed. A massive screen flickered to life. And there it was, my kitchen, my home. The entire courtroom watched in absolute, horrified silence. They saw Olivia in her pink robe and Brandon the dark glass vial. They heard her light, cruel voice, captured by the button on my shirt. Don't forget Dad's vitamins. We need him to get his strength back. They watched my son, my Brandon, tap the white powder into the coffee machine. Tap, tap, tap. A woman in the jury box let out a strangled gasp and put her hand over her mouth. They watched me spill the first cup. They heard my frantic, fake apologies. They heard me, the confused old man, beg my son to make me another. And then they watched Brandon, his face tight with impatience, do it again. The video ended. The lights came up. The silence was absolute, broken only by a single sound. A wail. It wasn't a sob. It was a raw, animal shriek of pure terror. It was Olivia. She lunged forward, clawing at the table, her eyes rolling back in her head. It was him, she screamed, pointing at Brandon. It was all him. He made me. He told me. He told me he'd kill me too. He said it was just vitamins. I didn't know. She collapsed, babbling hysterically, confessing everything, admitting to the thallium, the planning, everything, trying to save herself. It took the jury 45 minutes. We stood for the verdict. On the charge of murder in the first degree of Margaret Carver, how do you find? Guilty. Olivia slumped, her wails cut off as if her strings had been cut. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree of Robert Carver, how do you find? Guilty. Brandon just stood there. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just stared straight ahead. The sentencing was 2 weeks later. It was a formality. The judge looked down at them, his face a mask of pure disgust. Brandon Harrison, Olivia Harrison, for the cold, calculated, and monstrous murder of your mother and mother-in-law, and for the diabolical conspiracy to murder your father and frame him for your crimes, this court sentences you both to 2 consecutive terms of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Life. Olivia fainted, slumping to the floor. Brandon just nodded. As they cuffed him, He turned. He looked at me one last time. His eyes were empty. The hatred was gone. There was nothing. Nothing left at all. I stood up. I walked out of the courtroom, past the crush of cameras, past the reporters shouting my name. Harrison Blackwell was waiting on the steps, the same place he'd been waiting for me just 6 months ago, a lifetime ago. He didn't say anything. He just put a hand on my shoulder. It was over. 1 year later, I sold the house. I couldn't live there. Too many ghosts. I moved to a small apartment across town. 2 bedrooms. Quiet. Anonymous. My health stabilized. The thallium slowly left my system. But the tremor in my hands, that stayed. A permanent reminder. I visit Margaret's grave every week. I talk to her about the trial, about Brandon, about how she saved my life. And one day, cleaning out the last of her things, I found it a letter, hidden in her jewelry box, in her handwriting. "My dearest Robert," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you know the truth about how I died. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive. I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, afraid Brandon would find out and hurt you before I could protect you. But I want you to know, I love you. I have always loved you. Survive, Robert. Live fully. Don't let them take that from you too. You are stronger than you know. Margaret." I folded the letter. I put it in my wallet. I carry it with me every day. Margaret's last words to me were, "Survive." And I did. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the people you trust, if it reminded you that evil doesn't always announce itself, it sometimes wears a smile and makes you coffee, then do me a favor, subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment telling me what you think about Brandon and Olivia's sentences. Were they too harsh? Not harsh enough? And share this story, because somewhere out there, someone might be in the same situation I was. And maybe, just maybe, this story will save their life the way Margaret saved mine. Thank you for watching.